So, this is the first mainline Luxin video in over a month. Again, I'm sorry, I think I am on an actually good schedule for real this time. And I've been getting a bit more attention to my channel recently because some videos have blown up more than they usually do. Now you'd think I'd be taking this opportunity to capitalize on that whole Chugga-Conroy Xenoblade 2 Let's Play, but nope! Back to Xenoblade 1 yet again, we're talking about Tyrea today. Would it be smart for me to make a bunch of beginner-level Xenoblade 2 lore stuff right now? Probably, but as of today, a joke video that took about 20 minutes to make is performing far better than anything I put serious effort into for the past several months, and I just want to talk about Hot Scientist Bird, goddammit. And so here we are. This is a character discussion of Tyrea. Not really much more to say about it, and mercifully I only have spoilers for 2 games for once, and those are just Xenoblade 1 and Future Connected, the 2 games she's actually in. Believe it or not, I can actually like something about these games without it even having the potential of connecting to something in another game or universe, and this is definitely one of those cases. Firstly though, I'm gonna get this one part out of the way before anything else. Yes, Tyrea should have been a playable party member in Future Connected. I know this, you know this, and I'm pretty sure Monolith definitely knows this too. In the secret files, they talked about how characters like Desiree and Leonata would make interesting party members, and Tyrea has a much bigger role in the epilogue than either of those does in the main game, so yeah, I think she'd be pretty high on the list of people we would have liked to make playable in Future Connected. That being said, I don't need the shadow of this one unfortunate but undeniable fact about her character to hang over the rest of the video, so just get all your disappointment at her NPC-ness out at once here, and we can all move on. Okay, good to go? Because I'm good to go, and I'm going to start whether you're ready or not. In the main game, Tyrea is first introduced as an Inquisitor of the Bionite Order, a shadowy cult that worships the Bionis and champions racial purity among the Hyantia, so, you know, she obviously has a lot of development for me to start actually liking her. The Order was thought to have been stamped out and made illegal centuries ago by a previous emperor, but they persisted, and by the time of the game, the leader of the faction that's seeking to manipulate the Imperial household from within is none other than Yumea, first consort to the current emperor. Tyrea was conceived by her and an unknown Hams during one of the Order's rituals, making her just as quote-unquote tainted as the princess she'd later come to oppose. Now, presumably she is older than Melia since she both looks and acts the part, even referring to Melia as a child on multiple occasions, but maybe the ritual caused kids to age faster or something, I don't know. Being the child of Yumea, Tyrea is actually a half-sister to Callian Antiqua, just like Melia is, albeit through the other parent, making the two of them technically stepsisters. We don't really know too much about her early life until she explains it a bit in Future Connected, but Tyrea was definitely raised by the Order, being trained as an assassin, and almost certainly being brainwashed into believing their worldview. It's not spelled out for certain, but the Order does worship the Bionis itself in a bit of a different capacity than the Hams, and it retains some knowledge of and accepts the Telethia transformation, so it's actually quite possible they knew of Zanza to some degree, or were at the very least descended from his worshippers in the ancient past. We don't know when she was made immortal, but maybe Lorithia was a leader of the Order at some point before becoming a disciple. Who knows? Back to Tyrea though, she is first seen in Alchemoth before the tomb conspiring with her mother. At this point, she seems to believe herself a full Hyantia, though she does seem to know she's Yumea's child, and it seems like she was the commanding officer of the Order members who attacked the party during the Great Room Service scene. It's also here that we learn her title as Inquisitor, which is the only thing in this video I can remotely connect to another game, and that's just Inquisitor is a title that's been used multiple times in the Xeno series. Margulis in Xenosaga is an Inquisitor, and Morag is a special case of Inquisitor in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Callian sees the two talking here, but doesn't hear what's going on, so he doesn't actually discover the conspiracy. Later, Tyrea and a Telethia serve as the boss of the Hyantia Tomb dungeon, where they're trying to assassinate Melia. The really noteworthy part of this interaction is how she says Melia has no right to refer to Yumea as mother, since of course she views herself as the consort's true child, being of pure blood, as far as she knows. After being defeated here, she is actually not seen again unless you start the optional side quest Melancholy Tyrea in Colony 6 after the events of Mechanis Core. She's found passed out outside the colony, and when she comes to, she argues with the party, still seeming to think she's pure-blooded. Rhine, of all people, chews her out for saying that Melia is just like her, saying she's just jealous of her success, and Tyrea storms off, at least trying to justify to herself that she's only thinking of her people. After this, a bit of a fake-out thing occurs, where Tyrea vanishes, a Telethia attacks the colony, everyone thinks that it's transformed Tyrea, they track it down to Macna and defeat it, only to then learn that it was actually a transformed Yumea once Tyrea shows up safe and sound. It turns out that she'd been following her mother around the Bionis ever since she transformed, hoping to kill her in order to satisfy her final wish. Melia is able to convince her to let her do the deed instead so she doesn't have to kill her own mother, and it seems like Tyrea does come to understand her philosophy at least a little bit. She then just up and out of nowhere flies away with the wings on her head, something no other High Entia can do, half-blood or otherwise, and Dunban says they'll definitely meet again. Melia then confirms that Tyrea is half Homs, possibly explaining why she was acting so conflicted, and that Yumea probably foresaw this happening and was just worried for her daughter. So, this is all great. It's a fantastic setup for a redemption arc of a character raised among hate to better herself through facing the fact that she is actually the thing she was raised to despise, and coming to terms with that. Unfortunately, this teasing at something deeper is all we got for 10 years in between the original release and Future Connected. And so, a year and change later in-universe and an entire decade out of universe, she's met in Future Connected as Teelan's big sis, protecting him and assisting in his research to turn the Telethia back into High Entia. It's quite evident from the moment you meet her that she's already changed quite a bit, and it turns out she met him before the Fog King attacked Alchemoth, and took him in after they had to flee and his father died. Her first conversation with Melia in the epilogue is extremely powerful to me. Despite how together she looked all things considered when we last saw her, it turns out that she'd completely given up and was just looking for a place to die when she happened to wind up on the Bionis shoulder. She thought the Fog King was going to be the perfect enemy against which to meet her end, but ended up saving Teelan on a whim and became far too attached to him to even contemplate dying anymore. Her xenophobic beliefs have changed into wanting to ensure the future for all High Entia regardless of blood, trying to restore Telethia into pure bloods with Teelan, and also imploring Melia to become a beacon of hope for the mixed-race ones that remain. She, as a villain partway through a redemption arc, is then immediately put into contrast with a new villain who is just as bad as she was in the past, Gelgar. While Tyrea is a half-Entia raised amongst hate for her own kind, who has through connections with others managed to become a better person, though she still has a bit of a way to go as we'll see later, he was a victim of hate growing up, and that embittered him to believe that his kind is the only one that should be allowed to exist. Once the lab is destroyed by Gelgar, she's basically lost everything again, but this time she doesn't give in, and is the one to scold Melia for risking her life when she did. She's harsh, as she is to everyone except Teelan, but she clearly does care for her, eventually even thanking her for her actions. After this, she even begins putting her combat strength to use protecting Grandel, stepping out of the shadows for the first time to do what's right for everyone, regardless of race or heritage, even refusing to go with the party to retrieve the companions, just so the line can hold out for a little longer. She does fully intend to sacrifice herself, but the context is very different from before. This is for the sake of everyone in Grandel, the future of the High Entia, and to ensure Melia becomes the leader she needs to be, not fulfilling a death wish. She's willing to lay down her life in protection of others, rather than throw it away. After this, she even symbolically gives away her Inquisitor mask to Melia, not only saying she no longer needs a symbol of her past, but also fully trusting the Empress with the future of her people. This is all the required stuff we see of her until the end of the main story, but she also gets 2 quiet moments with her stepsister. A prerequisite for these is the Melia-Nene quiet moment, Family Relations, where Melia explains their relationship to her and then gets a pep talk from the Napon, eventually deciding to actually go and talk to her. Then, in Tyrea's Uncertainty, she discusses the coincidence that chance brought her back to Alchemoth, and how the people of Grandel accepted her without question, implying she's protecting them as a means of repayment, which gives her a parallel with Kino of all characters. Melia asks her to join the party, which she unfortunately declines, still feeling lost in life. The one part of Melia's speech that does seem to get to her is when she calls her the only family she has left, and despite all the growing she's done, she still has to ask her departed mother for a sign of whether or not she's even worthy to stand with the Empress given her past. She clearly recognizes that what she's done is wrong, and at the same time doesn't regret it and wants to move on, while also thinking herself irredeemable despite the amount of people who've now accepted her. This all comes to a head in Light and Shadow, the final quiet moment in Future Connected. In it, Tyrea and Melia discuss their first fight, and how impressive it is that they went from dueling to the death to standing side by side with a common goal. Tyrea reaffirms that Melia is the light, the one who will lead the High Entia into this new world, but also that she doesn't feel herself deserving of being there for that. She's still stuck in that self-loathing, unable to see herself as more than a stain and a hindrance on Melia's plans. Melia actually brings the we're not different point back around, saying they're alike in a good way because they're both half Entia trying to help their people, but a mention of Yumea turns things a bit heated until Nene comes to defuse things. Tyrea does refer to Nene with some pretty dehumanizing language there, and it definitely is kind of uncomfortable, even though Nene brushes it off completely because she's a saint. And yeah, I could see why you might think that she hasn't really gotten too much better because of this, but personally, while obviously language like this isn't good by any stretch, going from actively wanting to murder people because they're different to, in a moment of anger, blurting out some pretty hurtful casual racism is definitely a marked improvement. And also, Rein is pretty discriminatory against Nopon at the beginning of the game, and he obviously gets so much better because of his friendship with Ricky, but no one ever calls him out on that. It's like a legitimate character flaw that I could easily see happening in the real world, and he completely gets over it, starting to respect Nopon. It's just that Tyrea started from a much worse place, and she's only now getting to where Rein was at the start of the game, but she still fights to defend Grandel, and it's not just because there are high Entia there. She clearly doesn't discriminate when it comes to all of that. And yeah, it's just a sign that while she's definitely improved a lot, she has a lot to go, and that isn't a bad thing. As long as she keeps going on an upward trend, I think we should still congratulate her for it. Anyway though, Tyrea finally opens up about her mother, explaining her reasoning and personality, as well as a bit about her own past, and how she grew up to serve Yumea exclusively. Speaking this all out loud to Melia and Nene seems to allow her to reach something inside herself, and she's finally able to laugh at the situation, resolving herself to accept her past and honor her mother, faults and all, while still standing beside Melia, as the shadow of the new Empress, swearing herself in service to the throne. She leaves almost immediately after this, but Nene sees how much closer they've grown, and although not to her face, Melia does directly refer to her as her sister, which is honestly the one thing that I wanted to see as soon as I saw that Tyrea was going to be in Future Connected, and amongst everything else was probably my favorite single moment of the game, even more than the potential Xenosaga connections. Again, I like things that aren't references to other things sometimes. Believe me. In the ending, before the credits, when the party returns victorious back to Grandel, Tyrea is seen hanging out on her own, doing the classic cool guy back to the tree pose, and she and Melia share a warm, understanding smile, that being the thing that causes it to cut to the credits. In the post-credit scene, though, we finally see the resolution of all this. Tyrea is the one talking Melia up before her coronation, acting far friendlier than before, even teasing her a bit, and finally, walking side by side with her sister to face the uncertain future together. While in the main game, Tyrea is an interesting minor antagonist who has the advantage of not dying so she can be expended on a bit in side quests, Future Connected turns her into a fantastic, quintessential Xeno character. She has her faults and her flaws, her own mental issues she must deal with from a troubled past she wants to overcome, but in the end, she is improving, rising above the past in her own way and fighting for the sake of the world alongside those she's come to care for. The series uses found family a lot, and while she is technically related to the sister she finds, A, she has Teelan, who is a brother she's not related to at all, and B, this is yet another good example of the trope done right. Melia deciding to make her part of her family whether she wants to be or not, and Nene just enabling that in her own precious way, just makes you want to root for her even more. She starts out as a villain with no perceivable redeeming qualities, and over the course of both time and major events in her life and the world at large, transforms into a better person whose good actions already outweigh the bad, and who's already worthy of the companionship of the friends and family she's found herself with. Am I overblowing this? Maybe. But to me, Tyrea is now a genuinely great character with a fantastic, believable redemption arc. Granted, this may just be tailored specifically to me. Obviously, going from assassin for a xenophobic murder cult to not that is a major improvement, but then they had to go the next step and make her a hot scientist too, so as soon as they did that, I'd probably be on board no matter what they did to her character. But that aside, I still think she's pretty cool, even if some of that isn't the case for you. And that's the video. I think this actually turned out a little bit shorter than usual, but that might be because I had such a good idea of exactly what I was going to say in my mind beforehand that I wrote a full script, like word for word for the most part, instead of bullet points, which is what I usually do. And honestly, I don't know if you guys are going to like this, as is always the case, But personally, this is one of my favorite videos that I've worked on in recent memory. Like, every Xeno party member, that's something I wanted to do for a while. I got that out, I'm proud of that, I wish more people watched it, but whatever. But this one, just, yeah. Technically, I've wanted to do this for longer. Like, I beat Future Connected Day 2, I'm thinking, and this has been in my mind the entire time. And I'm just glad to get it out finally. Hopefully you enjoy it too. Hopefully, if you're a new viewer, you'll stick around and subscribe for more content, because I'm talking about all the Xeno games, not just this one. And hopefully, for a next time, until next time, this is Luxin, signing off.